Hello, hello. Welcome to the Okwera Podcast, aka T.O.P, where we're elevating you to the top. I'm your host, Justina Kanza. We've got some exciting guests for you today. I hope you stick around to the end and catch you soon. If you're like me, you're a founder, you work a 9 to 5 job and so many other things in between, you're always looking for ways to do your work effectively and efficiently, right? And so AI has provided an opportunity for many of us to do that. And especially for founders, it's provided an opportunity to build ventures using AI, to scale your business using AI, and to scale your operations using AI. And one of my absolute favorite AI tools to use is actually OneCliq. It helps bite-sizing long-form content like this podcast so much easier. It makes my market research so much easier. And so today I'm very excited to sit down with Tanika, who's the head of AI at OneCliq. Hi, Tanika.
Hey, Justina.
Thank you for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me on.
Amazing, amazing. And so I just name dropped OneCliq, but you want to give us a little rundown of OneCliq? What is OneCliq and who is Tanika above everything else?
Yeah, so I am one of the co-founders of OneCliq. I lead our systems design and product vision primarily. A lot of my role is prompt engineering, so working directly with generative models. OneCliq is really interesting because we've evolved so much as a company and as a product. So the product that you use every day is our creative assistant. So we help people kind of bite size and repurpose their videos across different platforms. But one of our kind of leading products today is very different, and I'm really excited to share more about this. This product is more related to research. And so it's kind of like a Google search, but for public opinion. So you can search any topic that people are talking about online, and we'll give you a deeper understanding of what they're saying across different platforms like TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. And we're seeing that this really helps marketing agencies and brands understand their communities more genuinely and then be able to connect with them through their content and through their messaging.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I had an opportunity to use that tool as well over the past week. I love it. I was raving about it to my team. It made everything so much easier because we're rolling out a lending program. And we've been doing since December lots of market research, putting out surveys out there. And when you told me about the tool, I used it in less than 20 minutes. Honestly, I had a whole presentation ready for my team around this is what the market is saying around SMB lending. This is some programs and initiatives we can create around this. So it's an absolute game changer for marketing agencies and brands alike, but also just for startups and founders who are starting from very early on. We're lean. You don't have a team to do market research for you, and it just makes everything so much easier. But in line with that, though, for founders that are just now starting to explore generative AI, what exactly is it? Why does it matter? Why should they be looking into this technology?
So generative AI is a kind of artificial intelligence that we have never really had before. When we think of AI previous to generative AI, we could think of models that were maybe predictive. You know, they could kind of predict or categorize information based on prior training. But with generative AI, it's a bit different because it's not just predicting, it's actually creating something entirely new. So in the context of, and I guess I should back up a bit. Generative AI is kind of a broad category. There's lots of different types of generative models. So there's models that produce text, right? They generate text, and we can see a clear example with ChatGPT. There's some models that produce images or videos or audio. Some models even return, and this is some of the crazier stuff, but they can return like how proteins will fold, basically a prediction on how proteins will fold. So that's like a kind of thing that they can generate as well. So these models, they're not just predicting, what an image of a cat looks like. They're actually generating all of those pixels to create that image based on all of the previous images of cats it's ever been trained on. So it's creating associations across that data that it's been trained on to understand more deeply the meaning of things and what they look like and how they might interact with the world, right? So especially when it comes to video, understanding things like gravity is really important. If you throw something up, it'll probably come back down. Something rolls off a table, it will probably fall to the ground. So it's understanding how things relate to the world just by understanding associations across the data it's been trained on, so that it can create something brand new. So that's really, I think, the amazing thing about generative AI is that the potential for it to help us understand the world around us, help us create things in our daily work, as you were describing, is really infinite. And I think we're just at the very beginning of this kind of transformation.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it then does provide such a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs to innovate in a different way, in a faster way as well, in a more efficient way. But what are some misconceptions that you've heard around this? I imagine there might even be some things on the ethical side of it, especially if it's generating things from scratch.
Some of the misconceptions I've heard from founders who are looking to build with AI is this idea that if you just throw AI into the mix, your product will be valuable. You know, I think that's one of the main misconceptions I've heard from folks who are looking to build with AI. And this is not just like in our own community. Y Combinator is a great startup community, one of the best accelerators I think that we've ever seen, located in San Fran or the Bay Area. And they describe this problem as well. So I think it's pretty much a global phenomenon. And the problem here is that generative AI, and I was describing it like this earlier today, it's kind of like electricity, right? In a way that it's a very universal, kind of generally applicable, new kind of technology. But it's only helpful insofar that we can give it structure, you know, create things that we can funnel that electricity into, right? Like, so we have these lights, we have TVs, we have all sorts of electronic devices that we can use electricity to power to make that electricity helpful to us in everyday contexts. And so the same thing applies for intelligence and what generative AI is kind of bringing to us. You can use it in many different ways, but it's only as valuable and helpful as the kind of packaging that you put it in. You know, so you still have to build a generally valuable product. The business essentials still apply. You have to understand what kind of problem you're solving and actually solve that problem effectively enough for somebody to want to pay you for the product you're building. And Gen AI is never just going to come in and save the day and fix everything. Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I think that's a perfect segue to my next question, because I had an idea for a product or solution just a few weeks ago based on, you know, the work I've done in the ecosystem and some of my own market research, thanks to OneCliq. And immediately I was like, I gotta get on the phone with one of my technical friends because I think I need a CTO for this. And I think we need to bring in AI for this. And that was like my immediate go-to. And when I was on the phone with him, he said, I was like, that sounds like a great idea. But the first step is let's just talk about it and see if it's actually an AI product that we have to build. And so my question there is, how do founders evaluate if their idea is one that has to be built using generative AI? What are some criteria that they should consider for this?
Such a great question. So I'm going to say two things that are kind of contradictory. So one, yeah, you shouldn't really look for anything and everything you could just kind of plug AI into. Kind of like that phrase, like, you don't need a hammer, you know, to solve every problem. You really just need a hammer for when you need to work with nails. So yeah, don't try to put AI into everything. But, and this is where I'll contradict myself, I think it's really important now at this point in time for founders to really think critically about how they can engage with this kind of technological evolution. I want us to think back to like when the internet was first coming out in the late 1990s. It wasn't very widespread, right? But it did fundamentally transform everything, right? The way that we work, the way that we travel, like all of these different applications that were not possible prior to that point now became possible. And it was up to founders and entrepreneurs and creative people to find the ways to use the internet and apply the internet in ways that really, you know, was useful. And so we're at a point now where generative AI will have a similar impact. And so I think it's very important for people to really think about how they want to participate in that evolution. When it comes to evaluating how to use AI effectively, I think, again, it comes down to like business essentials, right? So really understanding the problem that you're trying to solve. And different models are good at different things. So if we were just strictly talking about text models, right? LLMs, large language models, I think in that context, you can really look at mundane, repetitive, administrative work that requires some kind of, maybe searching the internet, filling out a form, reading, writing, those types of cognitive skills. If there's a space where that is very redundant and kind of a bottleneck, that's a great space for you to start looking at applying AI or I should say LLMs, because they do that work very, very well, even right now. So all you really need to do is set up a structure or a system to apply that AI model to replace kind of the work that a human would be doing in that context. And that's what we do with our tool right now, with our research tool. And I know when we use language like replace, people are like, oh, jobs, but what we're talking about here is very mundane work that human beings hate doing and aren't very good at anyways. In our context, when we look at qualitative analysis, right? So looking at hundreds of comments online across different platforms and trying to understand what are the topics people are saying, how do they feel about those topics. You have to categorize and kind of create themes for all of that different information. And it's very difficult for a human to do. It's very cognitively heavy. I've done it, so that's why I know it's terrible work.
It's a lot.
And it takes a long time. And so that's a perfect area for AI to kind of come in and automate that work so that instead of spending your time on that really like mundane, repetitive work, you can instead just be more creative. Once you've got the insight, now you can creatively think about what to do with it, and you haven't, wasted all of your energy trying to get there in the first place.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And I think it really brings up the question of how then, in addition to what you've shared, some of the mundane tasks being automated, so to say, what other ways can startups and founders in general just really decide whether they need to integrate AI into an existing product or, create a new product altogether? What is the best approach when it comes to this?
Yeah. I think it's really just reflecting on your context or your situation. So there's a few ways I would highly recommend you really strongly think about how to involve generative AI in your work. One is your own workflows, right? Your own day-to-day work. So we're building a product for our customers, but we're also considering other products for our own teams to use. So one example is chatbots on websites have become far more sophisticated, right? They're way more helpful than they used to be. And that's an area where we're looking at to help our customer success, because people are maybe less willing to send an email, to book a demo. They're busy. They might be working at odd hours. And so if there's a little chat assistant there that they know they can get helpful answers from, they will likely go to that to get those answers. And so that's one of the things where we don't need to build that in-house. There's tons of those applications. We just need to find one that works for us and implement it. And that's a clear way where we can use Gen AI to actually improve our own internal operations. The other is more related to your question here, which is, should we use AI to augment the offering that we provide, the product that we provide, or should we build a tool that's very much kind of centered around AI? I think that this question can also kind of be one and the same, which is it really gets back down to the problem that you're trying to solve for your clients. I think that the idea that an AI product is just a prompt to an LLM is actually one of those misconceptions. It's actually a lot of software, traditional, normal, regular software, and maybe a bit of like systems design. For our purposes, it is a lot of systems design. And that really just means creating or mapping out what is the workflow that our user would typically do to perform this task, and what are all the steps along the way that we can plug in an LLM to perform that task for them instead, right? And you can chain that together in a system that works together to complete that entire workflow using all of those different steps. Right? So sometimes it requires that level of thinking, and sometimes it's just software, and you can kind of plug it in here and there where it's helpful. So it's really about the product you're building, the problem you're solving, and I guess to what extent your team really wants to go all in on AI, or it just wants to benefit here and there.
Absolutely. That's very, very exciting how you've segmented it into two ways, I guess. One is the AI tools that you're using as a team internally to automate your own processes. And another one is how do you create a service and offering that is either centered around AI or integrates AI. And then also just evaluating if, I think on the latter, if it is necessary, right? Where is it necessary? Where is it duplication? And then you also mentioned about really evaluating how AI ready, I guess, your team is. And so that's my next question there on building a Gen AI team. What's your best advice for assembling a team with the right skills to build Gen AI? And what roles and expertise should the founders be looking for when hiring this Gen AI team, if you will?
Yeah, I think when hiring generally in a startup, the most important thing to hire for is personality. It's not actually skill sets. So yeah, it's interesting because a startup is unlike any other job you're ever going to have, right? There's no structure. There's a lot of precarity, right? And there's nobody telling you what to do every day. You have to determine that for yourself. And so there's a very specific kind of personality trait that's good in those environments, especially when startups deal with a lot of financial precarity, a lot of stress, a lot of strain. And then it's also just like learning every day, and there's problems every single day. Your number one job is just problem solving every day. Building a startup, I've described it in many different ways. Sometimes it feels like getting punched in the face all the time. But it also feels like you're running through a maze, and there's like in complete darkness. And the goal is actually to get through the maze as quickly as you can. It's not to make the least amount of mistakes. It's actually to get through as fast as you can. And so initially you're just running as fast as you can and smashing into walls, getting up and reorienting yourself based on that painful information, and then running again, right?
Such a painful scene.
It's a very painful experience. I don't recommend it to everyone.
That's why you need the personality hires, because it's a certain personality that can really get through that.
Exactly. It's a very rare kind of personality trait that seeks that out and finds it fun and can get punched in the face and smile while they're getting back up, And so that's number one, personality trait. And the specific personality traits you're looking for here is, of course, resilience. And that's not like just a glamorous thing. Resilience is actually a pretty not fun experience, right? Getting punched in the face and being willing to get back up every single day. Self-learning, right? Because, and we'll get into this more, but in a startup, everybody is self-learning. You have to be self-motivated. You have to be passionate and driven about the space generally that you're operating in. And I think all of those personality traits are an absolute must for anybody working in a Gen AI team or a product that's building with Gen AI, because all of those qualities that we just described about a startup is like times 100 in the Gen AI space. This is technology that didn't exist more than like 3 years ago, right? Like, I mean, it did, but it wasn't publicly available, right? This is stuff that nobody's going to tell you how to do it, right? You really have to learn as you go, and you have to be that kind of driven person that's willing to do that and that's attentive enough to like understand what they should be learning from their experience and apply it, right? Not just doing the same thing again and again. And you have to be extremely open-minded because you're really kind of doing the impossible. Like what we've built was previously impossible without Gen AI. You would had to have a human being do that. You could automate quantitative analysis with computers. You could never automate qualitative analysis. You had to have human researchers do that. And so you need people who are not going to be thinking like in a closed box or shutting down ideas or thinking, oh, that's going to be too hard or that's going to be impossible, or people who depend on you to tell them what to do. You need people who are going to take initiative, who think anything is possible, who think, even if it's difficult, we're going to do it. And that's why it's like good for us to do, because it's difficult and nobody else will do it. You need those people who are really driven. So it's not about skills. I'm the prompt engineer on our team. Nobody's going to teach you how to prompt, like prompt engineering is not something taught in schools. It didn't exist like 3-4 years ago. And so you need people who can take that on themselves. A lot of software engineers, they have no experience with LLMs. So you could have a software engineer who's got great experience with machine learning, traditional machine learning, but have no idea how to work with LLMs, right? So it's really not about skills. It's about all of those other personality traits, it's important to have people on your team who can code and who can do other things, you know. I'll tell you a bit about the skill sets on our team. So I'm the prompt engineer. I also have the research background, so I understand the workflow that we're building. So I design the system, right? Like that's why I'm very much involved in the systems design. And also the product vision is just like understanding where we want it to go from the user's perspective. Like what would I want as that user? Yeah, as a researcher. So that's my role. Our CTO, he is also very heavily involved in the systems design, but more from a software architecture perspective. He and our lead backend engineer, they work on really setting up like, okay, what does the data system look like? You know, what do our databases look like? How do we store data and how do we connect or make connections between data? So it's very architectural. We have, of course, our front-end engineer, our designer, our head of product, who is really focused on product management. You need somebody who's not doing the tasks themselves. Their job is to make sure everybody else does their tasks. Right? And you'll notice like we have worked with machine learning engineers in past, but we ended up finding that they weren't really doing work that was specific to their skill sets, right? So you can actually build these tools with a regular kind of team. You do need a prompt engineer. That's the one kind of additional thing that you absolutely have to have. But really, it's the mentality. Everybody on my team that I just described, they're very much like, okay, guys, we're going to do some crazy stuff, but we're all really excited to do it.
Absolutely. Visionaries, dreamers, and then doers above everything else. But one thing I admire the most through this all is also that you have a social sciences background, and you are the embodiment of the self-learning skill that you just mentioned, because you had to learn this by yourself, right?
Yeah.
So what was that process like for you, for anyone that's looking to get into AI? For me, really, because I'm being selfish with this. How do I learn? Where do I get started? What are some things that you picked along the way that every founder that is building within Gen AI might find useful as well?
Yeah, great question. So we discovered LLMs at a really dark time in our journey. So as you know, we were actually building a social learning platform a couple of years ago. And the goal was to build something kind of like TikTok, but explicitly for learning. And we came to find out after months of building a product, and we had raised a bit of funds, so we were burning those funds, building this product. We came to find out that we were building the wrong product. People couldn't actually use it because they couldn't bite-size their videos very easily. You know, educational videos would be pretty long form. In addition to realizing that we were building the wrong product, we can't sell our product. This was close to the fall of 2022. And so if you remember, the investment market kind of crashed. And so funds were no longer deploying capital, and we were running out of cash. So we got to a point where we were like, okay, guys, we've got this product we can't sell. We have no more cash, and we have no prospects of getting any more. What do we do? And, you know, we can no longer pay our team. Like, what are we going to do? And a lot of the people I just described to you on my team, we all came together to figure it out. And our CTO, he said, okay, well, if their main problem is they can't bite-size their content, let me whip something up really quickly, like in a week, that could do that. And let's just see if that's what they need. And in so doing, he came across GPT-3 prior to ChatGPT. And when we started playing with this LLM, we realized that there was something else there. You know, it was something like we've never really seen before. And I became obsessed, you know, and especially after seeing ChatGPT. I think the purpose of releasing ChatGPT was to show the world what could be done with these models. I just became obsessed, and I wanted to learn everything and anything about it. So luckily for us, that was a lifeline that drew us closer and closer to what people really wanted. And it really saved our team. You know, we rallied together, even though we couldn't pay ourselves anymore. And we decided we really wanted to pursue this crazy vision, because just a few minutes of playing with it, we could imagine one day these models would get to feel like maybe Jarvis from Iron Man, or the AI assistant in Her, you know, something truly sci-fi, but brought to life. So our team stayed on, and we continued building. And for myself, what this meant was Googling and YouTubing everything and anything around prompt engineering. And that's what I recommend. YouTube was a great source for me to self-learn. Sometimes there's not super valuable content on there, but it's very easily sussed out. So you'll be fine if you go to YouTube and just type in prompt engineering. Anthropic has a prompt engineering workshop they released recently that was really helpful. Deeplearning.ai is a website that has a bunch of short courses by Andrew Ning, who is one of the kind of foundational folks in Gen AI today. Fantastic courses. I recommend going there as well. And really, you just got to like learn a bit and then go to these websites and start prompting. And I don't mean go to ChatGPT. Don't go to ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a product built on top of a generative model, right? A foundation model. GPT is the underlying model that powers ChatGPT. But ChatGPT is a product that they've done many things to in order to make it function the way it does. So I recommend going straight to the source. You can go to OpenAI's Playground.
Okay.
You can go to, I believe Anthropic calls it a console. So Claude's console. And you can get access to the base foundation models. And then you can start learning how to prompt them. And prompt engineering is just simply writing a very specific, kind of meticulous set of instructions to a model, detailing a task that you want it to perform. And you send that prompt to the model and you see what it gives you in return. And you kind of compare the two to see, did it give me what I wanted or not? And you need to be a very clear communicator when you're prompting, because if anything is ambiguous, it will just try to figure it out, just like any other human being would.
Yeah.
You know, if I told you, I don't know, I need you to prioritize this task list, but that was all I said. How do you know what's important to me? There's so much ambiguity in that line of instruction. So you want to clarify everything. And when you look at the output from the model, it can help you understand what you need to clarify and what was, you know, not clear enough, because really these models will do what you tell them to. So if you're really good at telling them what to do, you can really unlock a lot of power. Yeah, they'll do a great job. So yeah, that's where I would say to start is just look online for some videos, or however you like to learn. There's also literature you can read. And then just use the models and just start prompting. 90% of the job with prompting is looking at what you get and iterating what you gave the model.
Absolutely. All those links and websites you've mentioned, I'm going to link them. But that is such great information, because I find it, like I mentioned, it's just so amazing to me that you learned this and you self-taught, and to have a clear roadmap on how to do it and where to do it is very important too. But one thing that stands out in the story that you just told is the pivot, the pivot from, was it a minute skill to now OneCliq. And so can you share a little bit of tips with founders there about when to pivot versus when to persevere, right? Because you could have very easily just said, no, we gotta change customers. For example, we gotta go heavy on marketing or customer success or whatever else, but you identified that you needed to pivot.
I think it comes down to a fundamental skill that I think every founder should have. And it's actually the most, I think, underrated and least kind of talked about. And it is also a skill that it has the greatest potential to increase your likelihood of success. And this skill is called customer discovery. Sometimes it goes by other phrases, but customer discovery is really what you need to learn. And this is the practice of talking to your customers or your potential customers in a very specific way to understand facts about their life, their workflow, in and around the problem that you're hoping to solve. So if you're B2B, you want to understand their workflow in their work, right? Specifically in the area that you hope to help them improve. If you're B2C, you want to understand the habits of your consumer in the areas that you're hoping to help them, service them. And you want to phrase your questions in ways where they cannot really lie to you. So founders, we often fall into this bucket where we seek validation for our ideas.
Confirmation bias.
Yes, yeah. And our customers are not the right people to ask those questions to, because they will always lie, almost always lie. Because if you ask, do you think this is a good idea? Would you use this? People are going to be like, yeah, no, like they don't want to hurt your feelings. So they're always going to be like, yeah, that sounds great. Totally, I would use that. Oh yeah, I would pay that. I would pay this for that. But they don't actually know that, So instead, you want to ask questions about what they do today without you. Don't even talk about your product. What do you do today? How do you do that? Why do you do it that way? And you'll come to discover their workflow, their habits, their motivations, what motivates them to do things, their biggest problems, what is the biggest bottleneck in their work. And then you can determine what is a good solution for everything that you've learned. And so for us with Minute Skill, we were not asking those questions correctly. We were seeking validation. We were asking, do you like the idea of microlearning? Would you ever want to bite-size your videos? Oh yeah, I would love that. But we didn't ask like, what do you do with your videos right now to reach these audiences? Like, what do you do? What would you have to do to use this platform anyways, And what we came to find out was we built a platform to host short form videos, but people could not bite-size their videos because they were not video editors and they didn't have the time to sit and, they already spent a bunch of time uploading their video to YouTube. Now they have to sit and re-watch the video multiple times and then find the places to cut it and find the parts that were most valuable. And then after all of that editing, they have to write a description to accompany that video and all of the videos in that. So if you could imagine a podcast that's 60 minutes and you want to take 5-minute clips, even 10-minute clips would be onerous. That's like 6 to 12 extra pieces of content per video. So we quickly realized after having those conversations, we had built the wrong product. We weren't solving the root problem as to why people were not sharing bite-sized videos. It wasn't because they didn't have a platform or TikTok is too noisy. It was because they couldn't do the workflow to actually create the short form videos. So that's why we ended up creating our creative assistant and that got us on track. But again, asking more of those good questions, we came to realize even before bite-sizing the content, their problem was actually in the research phase. Like, what content do I create in the first place? And that was actually a much bigger pain point for particularly marketing agencies and brands because they do the work today, but it is extremely onerous. Like, it takes weeks, sometimes months to do this research. And sometimes they're not even compensated for it if they're doing that research to win a contract. And it's entirely manual. So it's, the quality of the work, there's only so much humans can do when it comes to storing all of that information in our brains over a long period of time. Absolutely. So it's a perfect kind of space. One resource I want to share, and we'll share the link after, is a book called The Mom Test. The Mom Test. Yeah, by Robert Fitzgerald. And he really describes a framework for customer discovery and how to ask the right questions and how to avoid the wrong questions. And that particular skill could really make or break the success of your startup. Are you able to share some of the questions that the founders should be asking at this customer discovery stage? Yeah. So some questions to ask are, so I'll share in our context because it sometimes is very specific to who you're talking to. I might ask a person, so how do you go about doing this research? Like, do you do any research to understand consumer sentiment for the brands that you represent? And they might say, yeah, we do something called like social listening or social audits where we go to different people's or different customers' platforms and we, take the comments and we analyze them. And they might just say that. And what you actually need to do is ask follow-up questions. Okay, how do you analyze them? What software are you using to do this? What's the most time-consuming part of this? What's the most painful part? What else would I ask? Yeah, what tools do you use today? Things like that. Oh, and tell me about the last time you did this. It's actually really good to ask customers about the last time they did something or about something in the past because it's rooted in fact. It happened, right? But if you ask them, would you do this? Could you see yourself doing this? Then that's hypotheticals. And you don't really know, and they don't really know the answer to that question. They'll give you an answer, but it might not be rooted in fact. If you ask them how they did it in the past, they know exactly how they did it in the past. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm learning so much from this podcast. I can't wait to even play it back for myself. I've been listening to the Lean Startup and screw that guy. This is what I want to be listening to.
Yeah, Rob, he lays it out in that book. It's really great.
It is a great book. It is a great book, but you laid out really well too. And I think the founders are going to find this very valuable. But one of the things that I'm picking up on too is at the critical juncture of going from Minute Scale to OneCliq and identifying the different customer need, you guys were able to make a pivot. And I'm trying to ascertain if there was any aspect of because founders are in love with their solutions sometimes, right? We're in love with our solutions, and it makes it so hard to pivot, because for us, it's like that's what we want to deliver to our customers. So how were you guys able to navigate that? What aspects of like being in love with the problem more than the solution came to play here?
Yeah, definitely. Always. You want to hold on to your problem and who you're solving it for very tightly, and hold on to your solution very loosely. Because, and I think what really helped us do that was the realization that no matter what, no matter who you have on your team, how much experience you have, the first iteration of your product is always going to be crap. It's going to be terrible. And that's just the nature of it. You have to try to get to that beta or like MVP, whatever you want to call it, the first iteration of your product. Try to get there as quickly as possible, and then talk to people about it so that you can iterate upon it to get it to a better place. And as you iterate, you may find that you totally need to pivot. And for us, it was super clear. It was one of the best decisions we've ever made, and it was very easy to make that decision because with MinuteSkill, we saw all opportunities dry up. We saw all, because like as a founder, your job is to almost seek out and attract as many opportunities as possible for your startup, even if you're not going to pursue every single one, even though you know that most of them are not going to work out. Opportunities are like the lifeblood, right? It creates momentum. It helps you understand what direction to go in. And as soon as those opportunities start to dry up, momentum dies and you no longer know where to go, and you have no stimulus, no information telling you which direction to go in. It's kind of like that idea where like sharks have to keep swimming. I don't know if that's fact, or I don't know anything about animals like that, but startups need to keep swimming. You need to keep moving. And so if all of your opportunities are drying up, right, and you just can't make it work and it feels like you're trying to force it, you need to pivot, right? You need to let that thing go. Yeah, you should really just focus on the fact that you're doing something and who you're doing it for. And that should be good enough. Like chase that, hold on to that. Because if you let that go and you just restart an entirely new idea, you're starting from scratch. But if you hold on to who you're building for and the problems you're trying to solve, your solution may change, but you're still building off of what you've learned along the way. So as we've pivoted a lot, every single time, building the product, going to market with the product has become easier and easier. And the value we've built with the product has grown every single time because we're building off of our experiences in the past. So pivoting can be actually a strength, if you do it right. And don't be afraid of it. It's just naturally part of the journey. It's not failure. It's just a natural kind of part of what all of us have to do.
And founders have to be in love with that. They have to be in love with the pivoting or failure, if they call it that, because it means you're learning something. And the faster you can fail and pivot, the faster you can see what works and what doesn't work. But how do you pivot smartly? Let's talk about MVPs, or even just build smartly, really, right? MVPs, because it's so easy to say, okay, this is not working. We know our customers need bite-sizing video, tools or whatever in that realm. And you build something extremely complicated, resource extensive, you bring it back to the customers, they're like, yeah, not very much. So how do you pivot smartly?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And it goes back to product development life cycles. With your team, you really want to develop, and when I say your team, it might just be just you. It might just be you and your co-founder. Yes. Whoever it is, you and your team have to design a kind of framework for building, shipping, testing, learning, and then coming back to the drawing board and repeating all of those steps, right? So this is called like an iterative cycle or a product development cycle, where you should always start with the customer, right? And understanding their problems, like what problem are we trying to solve here? And what have we learned about them, about their workflow, not about what they think about our product or their opinions on anything else. What have we learned concretely about them and what they do, their problems, and then we can think about how we're going to solve it. So we go to the drawing board and we figure out, okay, maybe we need to implement this type of feature to help them solve this problem that they're experiencing. Then you really have to do a good bit of work to shape that feature up. Of course, develop it, share it with your customer. Maybe before you've even turned it into a product, you can just share mock-ups. You get more feedback from them, and then you kind of repeat that cycle as quickly as you can. And so when it comes to understanding when you need to pivot, you need to make that decision based on all of the information you've learned from those previous iterative cycles, right? So when we iterated and we moved in this direction, things got better. Or when we moved in this direction, things got worse. So what does that tell us about the landscape that we're in and ultimately the direction that we need to go in? And it can really depend on the customer and the problem and the solution, but also the broader market landscape that you're operating in. For us, it was clear that to us at the time that generative AI was going to take over the world. And so it was a good idea to pivot at that time, since we needed to pivot anyway, in a direction where we could leverage this technology to solve the problems that we were seeing. And it just so happened that the problems we were trying to solve would be perfectly solved with generative AI. So it wasn't really like we're trying to force that solution to work. So yeah, I think it's very much a learning process. You've really got to document, what you're doing and why, so that when it does work out or doesn't work out, you can continue to make decisions based on that.
Data, absolutely. I think that's very important. Just keeping an open mind, trying out different things, and especially bringing mock-ups and just MVPs before over-investing resources. Because I find founders burning through capital so quickly, and resources in general so quickly, because of just building something that they think, oh, okay, this didn't work, but the customers mentioned this other thing might work, so let's go and build and then bring it to market, and it just fails completely.
I've seen this a lot where I've spoken to founders and they're like, yep, I've invested 10,000, 30,000 of my personal dollars into building this app. And I'm like, okay, how many customers have you talked to? Well, I'll talk to them after I finish the app, then I'll share it with them. And I'm like, oh my goodness.
It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, because if they had known the first version of anything I build, no matter how much money I put into it, is going to be crap, how much money and time do you think they would have put into it instead? Right? So they're putting in 30,000 more, thinking that when they share it with their customer, that's going to be all. But if they knew that was actually step one of a million, they would have probably been like, okay, the cheapest and fastest we can get to it, And that's the mentality you really need to have, unless you're dealing with high stakes like healthcare, finance, things like that. It's a little different, but you should try to get to your MVP as quickly as possible.
The maze.
Exactly, the maze. It's not about the least amount of mistakes. It's not about being the most polished. It's actually about speed. It's like taking a test where you're graded not on how many questions you get correctly, but how quickly you finish the test, right? So it can be scrappy initially, but then you need to get feedback and then you can grow. But if you're over-investing time and resources into creating your first MVP, you'll likely end up in a place where we did with MinuteSkill, because that's what we did. We took 8 months, we used all of our initial funds to build a product that we didn't know people couldn't buy, people couldn't use. So you want to get something into the hands of your customers as quickly as possible, because that's the only way to learn.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is so invaluable. That is the speed of execution. The faster you do, the faster you know what works, the faster you fail, the faster you move forward. I really love that. But back to AI, Gen AI. What is the future of Gen AI as you see it?
Oh my goodness. Glorious. Yeah, no, I think it could also be scary, but we'll save that for another time. But no, I think it'll be, obviously transformative. I think it'll be more transformative than the internet, than mobile. I hope it'll be a net positive. I see that it will radically transform the way that we work, right? So a lot of the mundane tasks that we were talking about, hopefully Gen AI will be able to step in and help us, because humans don't need to waste our time on those things. We should focus our energies on the more creative work, not spending our cognitive loads on, the mundane stuff that really a computer could do. So I see a lot of that. I see it also transforming sciences in ways that will be really helpful. I don't know if folks have heard of AlphaFold. It's a model by Google's DeepMind, and it basically predicts how proteins will fold. And this is a problem that has really, it's been a bottleneck kind of a problem in the sciences, where it takes a very long time for a human being to be able to map out any of these things. And so that will have huge impacts on drug discovery, and all sorts of things, really. So I could see a whole kind of space where Gen AI will impact that. The way that we travel, the energy that we use and consume. So you can imagine all these different ways that founders and creatives and entrepreneurs have opportunities to contribute to this wave of transformation across everything. Like I've mentioned a few things here. Yes. I think everything and anything that we interact with, that we learn from, that we work with, the ways that we connect to people in person and digitally, all of these different things will be impacted by this technology. And I mean, we haven't even started talking about Gen AI and robotics, which is a whole other space. So I think right now, and another founder and I were talking about this earlier, Jonathan from Inventive, he has this saying where it's a really good time to be a creative person with good ideas, right? Because you don't need to have the software engineering background that you used to have to bring a good product to market. You can actually get a lot of that build done with Gen AI models like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. You can actually talk to these models to help you build out a scope for what you need to build, even as a non-technical founder. And then there are other tools that you can use to actually build like actual products. But yeah, I think it's a really great time for founders and creatives to just have an idea and just try it, because pretty much everything and anything you can think of, Gen AI will likely transform.
To do it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's such a great point, because one of the questions I was going to ask you after was for non-technical founders, right? How do they build ventures in the Gen AI space, in the tech space in general? But you mentioned it, right? It's just, as long as you have the idea, you have the creativity, and then you also put in the work to learn the different Gen AI platforms and tools that exist, that's one way to go for it. So I think gone are the days then where, as a founder from very early on, you need to have a technical co-founder in order to bring something to market.
Yeah, I think you could absolutely get a first MVP to your customers without a technical co-founder today. I think it's very beneficial to have one, because as you scale or as you mature your product, there are so many things that our CTO handles that I could never imagine. So there are still those things, but in order for you to get started and get something out there, and that can sometimes help you attract a CTO, the barriers to entry are far lower, and I think that will just continue to be the case as these models get faster and more intelligent and more capable. So I think don't be afraid. If anything, you're still a bit early, but things are moving very quickly. So you should just try to self-learn as much as you can. YouTube is a great resource to just learn, some of these skills that people are all learning together in real time, publicly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then Twitter or X is a great place to just see, what's happening. What is the kind of latest and greatest in Gen AI, because it moves so quickly. X is a really good place to just see what's happening, what's breaking, and stay up to date.
Interesting. I actually never thought about that. So thank you for that. In line with AI, again, ethics. How do we center that even as we're building with AI?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think it's very particular to what you're building. And I think that it comes down to you, your founder, like your co-founder, and your company having a clear set of values. Like for us, we want to empower people to do their work more effectively. And we want to take away the cognitive load that seems to hold them back from being, the best in their roles, and from being able to do the creative and high value work that they need to do for their clients. We don't want to replace them entirely. That's just part of our values and our ethics, and how we see generative AI being most valuable today is not to replace human beings, but to empower them, to give them superpowers that they never had before. So I think that it really comes down to you and your team imbuing your personal ethics into your company and how you use Gen AI.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Tanika. Well, I'm going to go to a rapid fire because I have so many questions and I don't know that we can go through all of them. And so some rapid fire questions. So what's one Gen AI tool platform every founder should try? I know the one that I should try, the one I would recommend, which is OneCliq, but which one would you recommend?
Thank you. Only one is tricky. because it's so easy to access, if you're trying to build with Gen AI, just go to OpenAI's Playground. Okay. It's so easy to use. Google also has an AI studio, so easy to use. You can see all of their models there and you can start prompting right away. And that will help you learn the skill of prompt engineering better than any other resource.
Amazing, amazing. What's the biggest challenge you faced while building with Gen AI?
Prompting. Yeah, I know. Prompting is actually a really time-consuming thing. No, honestly, it's, I wish I could have thought about this a little bit more because nothing really comes to mind. It's actually been a really great experience. I think it's really just the learning as quickly as possible. You have to be learning and doing at the same time. So it's really difficult sometimes to split the brain in that way. But yeah, I would say just keeping up with the pace and like learning as you go can always be a bit of a challenge.
I was going to say that too, because I anticipate that being the hardest and most challenging part for me when I start doing this.
Yeah, learning is painful.
It is valuable, but it's such a curve, especially for, when you're making the shift from a completely non-technical background to then getting into the technical side of things. So yeah, it's quite challenging. But what's the most innovative use of Gen AI you've seen in a startup?
In a startup, oh my goodness. I don't have a super quick answer for you. I would say, yeah, there's a lot out there. Maybe let's come back to this one so I can think about it.
Sounds good. What's one thing that surprises people when they start building with Gen AI?
I think how easy it actually is once you get your hands into it, it's not as mysterious as it seems. Like once you start playing with it, you can actually come to understand kind of like an intuition as to what you can get from models, what you can expect, like what they're good at, what they're not good at. So it's actually like less mysterious once you start playing with it.
Beautiful. That puts me at ease a lot. When integrating Gen AI with workflows and everything else and building with it really, how do you ensure the product still feels human and personal?
I think that we've seen a lot of these chatbot experiences like ChatGPT, and that can kind of skew our understanding of what is a valuable Gen AI tool, but they don't always have to be personified. So I think that regular software is a great way to bring the value of Gen AI to your users or your customers. It doesn't always have to have a persona or personality. You just really want to understand like what are they trying to do, and then good prompt engineering can really make a difference between the kind of quality output. So if we're talking about creative writing, you can get very stale AI kind of robotic writing, or you can get really beautiful and we get a lot of compliments about the way that our reports are structured because it's very kind of beautiful, kind of poetic, kind of not academic, but it's pretty thorough and rigorous at the same time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Also vibrant. That's one thing. I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, right? So it's a matter of prompt engineering, I would say, but also it's just about how you build your product itself.
Absolutely. Okay. Last but not the least, as a founder, you've been building OneCliq and Minute Skill for a while now. You've mentored other founders. You guys have raised over $1 million at OneCliq. Yeah. You've gotten into Google Startup. You have gotten into very prestigious accelerators across Canada. What are some four tips really, that you would give to entrepreneurs and founders as they're building to gain the level of success that you have? And some of the lessons learned you picked up along the way?
I would say learning and applying what you've learned is like the most critical thing as a founder. So that's one thing. Creating opportunities for yourself and your startup is also an important job. And so that means going out into the world and meeting people and making genuine connections and never really thinking like, oh, I'll just do that later. Or like, yeah, that application is so long, maybe it's not worth it. Like at one point, we applied to Google for Startups 3 times, right? And the first 2 times we didn't get in. And so the third time comes around and we're like, should we do this? Is it, is it worth our time if we might not get in? And we decided to do it because it's our job to create opportunities for our startup. And we got in, and that was one of the best things that's ever happened to us. So yeah, do the work to create those opportunities.
Absolutely.
We talked about this earlier, but I think it's worth really hammering down, which is that you really need to hold on to the problem that you're trying to solve or who you're trying to solve it for, and not so much the solution, because it's always going to change. So you should always just be willing to iterate iteration is something you should always do every day. Pivoting is something you do less often. So that would definitely be a word of advice, is to just iterate as much as needed, and really hold on to those who you're solving the problem for. And then the last thing I would say is, I think that your personal motivation and ambitions in this space are the most important thing to drive you, because it's a really challenging thing to do. If you're starting a startup because you think it would be cool, or you're doing it for the money, I have some bad news. It's not always cool. It's not always fun.
Drain your money, if anything.
Yeah, exactly. It's a huge financial risk, and not just if you're putting money into the company, but you're also preventing yourself from taking a huge salary that you could have had elsewhere.
Absolutely.
Right? So it's not actually glamorous. It needs to be something that you feel like you need to do. It's something that you could never see yourself doing something else, anything else. You need to have that personal commitment and drive, because it is a lot of ups and downs. And when you're down, you're really down. And you need something outside of all of these other flashy things to drive you to keep pushing through. Right. And really, I think what this amounts to is that you should never give up. Like, if that's your personal conviction that this is what you want to do, no matter how challenging it is, you should never give up. Because in our Minute Skill days, towards the end of Minute Skill, it looked like we had no opportunities. We could have lost our whole team. We could have ended up with nothing. But because of our personal commitments and drive, our team stayed on, and we continued and we persevered through that, and we came out the other side. And of course, now it seems like, there's like all of this success, but there were times when it just really felt like hopeless, and so you have to hold on to that internal personal commitment to get you through those moments where you just feel like, why am I doing this?
Your why has to be big enough. Your why has to be big enough to get you out of bed every day, because some days you will not want to get out of bed. Most days, really, you won't want to get out of bed because it's quite overwhelming.
Yeah, even when it's going really well, people see our Instagram and our LinkedIn right now, and they're like, it's, I'm watching you guys, things are going well. I'm like, yeah, they are. But also, like, behind the scenes, it's like 12, 14-hour days. And I want to get up in the morning, and I love what I do, and things are going well. So it feels great, but it's still like the hardest thing I've ever had to do. So that personal drive has got to be there. Otherwise, it's okay to think about something else, to do something else.
Absolutely. And that's why the personality comes into play there, because it has to be a personality of like resilience and grit, 4-7 times, rise of 8. Like, you just keep going at it.
Yeah. Absolutely. A little bit of obsession. Like, you just...
Yeah, you gotta be a little bit of OCD. You have to be a bit crazy too. You have to be a bit crazy too.
A few screws loose.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dream. Yeah. Oh, gosh. Okay, yeah.
That's pretty much it.
That's pretty much it.
Flashbacks.
I'm getting flashbacks. I'm like, it's a lot. But you know what makes it worthwhile is, once you have that why and you see the impact of the work that you're doing, absolutely, that really recharges you. And then it just also helps to have communities and, people, I call it a village of, folks that pour into you. You have your team. It sounds like you and your team have this beautiful relationship where everyone is aligned on the vision. Everyone has enough commitment and also enough stake in the game, if you will, to pour into each other. Because, if you, the prompt engineer, are not getting out of bed, we don't have any AI going here. So we need you. And you guys kind of lift each other up. I think it's important to have that sort of community.
Yeah. And I know you said 4, but I'm going to sneak one more in, which is you should really seek out that community. Accelerators and incubators are really important spaces to plug into. In the Toronto ecosystem, we have the Black Founders Network.
Absolutely.
We have the Black Entrepreneurship Alliance, we have Y-Space, so many others, Tree Frog, Google for Startups Accelerator. There's so many of these hubs and ecosystems. It's critical to join them. That's really what allowed us to grow and get to the places where we're at today. All of the things we've achieved today are because of the communities and the people in these networks. So absolutely plug in.
Absolutely. And speaking of plug in, you want to plug in OneCliq? Where can people find you guys on social media, and also you personally, Tanika? Where can folks connect with you?
Yeah, so OneCliq is on LinkedIn and Instagram. OneCliq is spelled ONECLIQ. And so you can follow us there. You can follow myself on LinkedIn and Instagram as well. I'm sure we'll throw those handles up. But on LinkedIn, Tanika McLeod, And on Instagram, it's Tenzen, Tennzen.
Are you Zen?
Yeah, Tenzen. And that's pretty much it. I hope people are able to follow our journey because we try to be transparent about, the things that are involved, in building a startup and running a team and pursuing a dream that's bigger than, you could imagine. And so I hope people find inspiration in that because I want people to be able to do that, and believe that they can do that. So we want to set that example.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you that you've done a great job at it. I find so much inspiration, especially the transparency piece of just showing the day-to-day of building a startup, because it's not always glamorous. And sometimes we see the glory, but we don't see the work and the grace that it took for, companies to get to where they are. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tanika, for being here with us. And thank you to our audience for joining us on this episode. I found it very, very valuable. I can only imagine you did so. And I imagine you have so many questions as well. So feel free to drop them in the chat. And until next time, goodbye.